In the swamp, Baptiste did not fear the dogs first. He feared the voice behind them. It was steady, trained, and close. The man leading the hounds knew where fugitives hid, how they crossed water, how they broke branches without leaving a trail. Baptiste had taught him those things. Years earlier, that hunter had been his son. The first sound was not the barking. It was the water moving. A slow pull beneath the cypress roots, black water sliding around old wood. Mud pressing against Baptiste's knees. His hands were buried beneath the surface, fingers locked around a root to keep his body from drifting. Above him, fog hung low between the trees, thick enough to hide a man, thin enough to betray movement. He did not breathe through his mouth. He breathed through a hollow reed cut short and held close beneath a mat of leaves. It was an old method, older than the men hunting him, older than the plantation that claimed his body, older than the paper that said he belonged to another man. The dogs were somewhere beyond the reeds. At first they sounded distant, then the sound sharpened, not wild. Directed, controlled. The barking came in bursts, then stopped, then started again. That meant someone was handling them well. Someone knew when to let them pull and when to hold them back. Baptiste listened. A lantern struck against a branch. A man cursed under his breath. Boots sank into wet ground. A chain rattled. Then another voice spoke, lower than the rest. Keep them off the open water. Baptiste closed his eyes. He knew that voice. Not because it belonged to an overseer. Not because it belonged to one of the white men who had ridden through slave quarters with pistols and orders. He knew it because years before that same voice had called to him from a muddy bank, asking how to tell deer tracks from a man's print. Caleb, his son, the boy who once followed him barefoot along the bayou's edge, was now leading the hunt. Baptiste did not move. He could not afford the movement. The smallest ripple could give him away. A frightened breath could pull the dogs toward him. A single snapped twig could end everything. He stayed beneath the roots while the hunt passed near enough for him to see the glow of the lanterns through the fog. Then Caleb called out, "Baptiste!" Not father, not pa, not the name a son uses when memory still has warmth in it. He called him the way a man reads from a wanted notice, the way property is named when it has run from the owner. That was the first wound of the night, not the dogs, not the cold, not the swamp pressing against his bones. It was hearing his own child speak his name as if blood had been erased. In 1842, in the Louisiana bayou, this was one of slavery's most deliberate crimes. It did not only use chains, fields, auctions, and patrols. It learned the structure of families and attacked there first. It sold children away. It punished parents through sons and daughters. It forced the enslaved to make impossible choices, then called the damage obedience. Baptiste was not being hunted by a stranger. He was being hunted by a system wearing his son's face. If you're listening from Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, the Carolinas, Haiti, Jamaica, or anywhere the memory of survival still moves through your people, comment where you're watching from. Let this story travel through the places where silence once protected the truth. Baptiste had not planned to run that night. For years he had survived by knowing when not to move. He was not young. His back carried the shape of labor. His hands were scarred from cane knives, oars, rope, and field tools. His face had the stillness of a man who had learned that emotion could be used against him if shown at the wrong time. On the plantation, men like Baptiste were watched closely, not because they were loud, because they were useful. They knew roads. They knew water crossings. They knew which trees stood beside shallow ground and which paths sank after rain. They knew how to repair boats, how to read weather, how to move at night without a flame. That kind of knowledge frightened owners. A man who knew the land could become a door. Baptiste had become exactly that. Over time, people came to him quietly. A woman whose child was about to be sold, a field hand marked for punishment, an old man who could no longer survive another season in the cane. Baptiste did not make speeches. He did not promise freedom like a preacher promising heaven. He dealt in roots, timing, silence, and risk. He knew which creek could hide footprints. He knew where wild onion could confuse a dog's nose. He knew when to step into moving water and when to crawl over roots so the mud would not take his shape. The bayou was not safety. It had snakes, deep holes, fever, insects, and water that could pull a tired body under without sound. But compared to the plantation, it had one advantage. It did not obey the master. That night, Baptiste carried knowledge more dangerous than any weapon. He knew the hidden passage through the cypress line, a route used by families who left no written record, no signed confession, no map that could be seized. The path existed in memory, in repeated steps, in signals left and removed before sunrise. The master wanted that route. Capturing Baptiste was only the surface of the hunt. The deeper purpose was to cut the artery of escape. The trouble had begun before sundown. 3 children had been marked for sale, not officially announced, not written where the enslaved could see it, but known the way these things were always known. A closed conversation near the stable. A visitor measuring bodies with his eyes. A mistress ordering extra clothing sorted. A driver told to keep certain children near the house in the morning. Baptiste saw the signs. By dark, the quarters had gone quiet in that unnatural way that meant fear was moving from cabin to cabin. A mother had pressed her hand over her youngest child's mouth to stop her crying. An older woman had wrapped cornbread in cloth. Someone had opened a gap behind a collapsed fence. No one said Baptiste's name aloud. No one needed to. He led them out after the last lamp in the big house dimmed. Not a crowd. Crowds made noise. He moved with a few at first, then passed them toward others, waiting near the tree line, a woman carrying a baby. 2 boys, 1 girl old enough to know she must not cry, an elder whose breathing came hard but who refused to be left. Baptiste did not look back at the cabins. Looking back was a luxury. They entered the swamp low and slow, feet placed where he placed his, cloth tied around ankles, no talking, no lantern. The only guide was Baptiste's hand, lifting, lowering, stopping, pointing. For a while the plan held, then the bell rang. Not the church bell, not the dinner bell. The alarm bell. 3 strikes, then a pause. 3 more. The plantation had discovered the absence faster than expected. Baptiste changed direction immediately. He sent the others forward with a young man who knew the first crossing. Baptiste stayed behind to break the trail. He dragged brush through soft mud. He stepped backward into water. He crushed bitter plants and smeared them across a fallen branch. Every action had one purpose: give the dogs a lie to follow. Then he heard the hounds released. The sound tore through the trees. Men shouted. Horses moved along firmer ground. Lanterns spread out behind him. The search party was larger than expected. That meant the master was not only angry, he was afraid. Afraid of losing property. Afraid of losing control. Afraid that one man's memory could open a road for many. Baptiste moved deeper into the cypress roots. He did not run in a straight line. Running straight was for panic. Panic left evidence. He crossed water twice, circled a stand of reeds, then returned near his own track to confuse direction. He lowered himself into a pool where roots rose like ribs from the mud. That was where he hid. That was where he heard Caleb. At first, Baptiste told himself he had mistaken the voice. Years of grief can make the dead speak in the mind. Caleb had been taken from him long ago, sold at 12. Gone before Baptiste could say what a father should say when the world takes his child. There had been no farewell, only an empty sleeping place. For years, Baptiste carried Caleb as absence. He remembered the boy's narrow shoulders, the way he used to ask questions in whispers, the way he would copy Baptiste's steps in mud, placing his feet exactly where his father had stepped. Baptiste had taught him the swamp, because enslaved children had to learn danger early. He taught Caleb how to see without staring, how to listen without turning his head, how to know when dogs were excited by scent and when they were only excited by their handler, how to move through cane without shaking the tops, how to break a branch downward instead of sideways so the damage looked natural. These were not hunting lessons, they were survival lessons, a father passing down what little protection he could. Now those lessons had returned in the hands of the enemy. Through the fog, Baptiste saw him. Caleb was taller than he should have been in Baptiste's memory, a grown man now, strong shoulders. A dark coat cut in the style of patrolmen and trackers. One hand held the lead line, the dogs strained low to the ground, noses working. Caleb did not let them rush. He studied the mud, the reeds, the water. Baptiste felt the cold settle deeper in his chest. His son had learned well, too well. Behind Caleb came the white men with guns, lanterns, and the confidence of men who believed the night belonged to them because the law said it did. One of them was the master's overseer. Another carried a long whip coiled at his side. The master himself was not visible yet, but Baptiste knew his presence was inside every order. Caleb raised his hand. The dogs stopped. He crouched near the bank and touched the mud. Baptiste watched from beneath the roots. Caleb had found the false trail. He knew it was false. Baptiste could see it in the way his son paused too long. He was reading not only the ground, but the mind behind it. A stranger might have followed the wrong sign. Caleb hesitated because he recognized the method. He recognized his father. One of the men behind him snapped, "Well?" Caleb did not answer at once. Then he pointed away from Baptiste's hiding place. That way! The dogs were pulled toward the reeds. Baptiste did not understand. Not fully. Not yet. Had Caleb missed him? Had he chosen not to see? Was it accident, hesitation, or strategy? In the swamp, uncertainty could kill as quickly as a bullet. Baptiste could not build hope out of one gesture, but the gesture mattered. The hunters moved on. A branch scraped against Caleb's sleeve as he passed. For 1 second, the lantern light reached his wrist. Baptiste saw a red cord tied there. His grip tightened around the root. Among the enslaved, signs traveled quietly. A color, a knot, a mark on a door, a strip of cloth tied where only certain eyes would understand it. The red cord was not decoration. It meant leverage. It meant someone close was being held under threat. Wife, child, mother, brother, someone the wearer could not protect except by obedience. Baptiste stared at that cord until the fog swallowed it. Now the shape of the hunt changed. Caleb was not free. He was not simply loyal to the master. He was bound by a different chain, one made of hostages and fear. The plantation had not only sent a son after his father, it had placed Caleb's own wife and child behind him like a blade. If Caleb failed, they would pay. If Baptiste escaped too cleanly, Caleb would be blamed. If the route was exposed, everyone Baptiste had guided would be hunted next. This was the machine at its most efficient. It did not need every man to believe in it. It only needed to put each person's loved ones under threat until obedience looked like choice. Baptiste remained in the water long after the lanterns moved away. The cold worked into his legs. Insects crawled along his neck. Somewhere beyond the trees, a dog barked again, then yelped as a handler corrected it. The men were still moving. The route was still in danger. The children were not safe yet. Baptiste lifted his face from the roots and listened. He understood the truth now. The master wanted more than one fugitive returned. He wanted the hidden road. He wanted the names of those who helped. He wanted the bayou emptied of secrets. And Caleb, forced into the lead, was both weapon and victim. Baptiste could not save everyone by running. He could not save Caleb by surrendering too soon, so he made the decision that would define the night. He would stop moving like a hunted man. He would become bait. Not for the dogs, for the master. The swamp had hidden him. Now it would judge the men who thought they controlled the hunt. Caleb had not learned the swamp from men with lanterns. He had learned it behind his father, step by step, when he was still small enough to disappear inside the tall grass. Baptiste remembered the boy clearly now, not as a tracker, not as the master's instrument, but as a child with mud on his ankles and questions he knew better than to ask near white ears. Caleb had been quiet but not empty. He watched everything. He watched his father's hands. He watched where Baptiste placed his feet. He watched how a man could read danger without turning his head toward it. That was how enslaved fathers taught when they were denied authority in every official way. They could not protect their sons with law. They could not keep them from sale. They could not promise inheritance, schooling, or safety. So they gave them smaller weapons: silence, memory, direction, restraint. Baptiste had given Caleb the bayou, not as a playground, as a map of survival. "Never step where the mud is too smooth," he once told him. Caleb had been 9 then, maybe 10. He had bent low beside a wet bank, studying the ground. Why? Because something already crossed there, or something is waiting under it. The boy nodded and touched the mud with 2 fingers. Baptiste pulled his hand back. Look first, touch last. That was a father's lesson. Simple, practical. No poetry, no comfort, just a rule that might keep a child alive. There were many rules like that. If dogs were loose, do not run first. Think first. If water moved too cleanly through reeds, someone had passed there. If birds rose all at once, men were coming. If a branch was broken high, a rider had passed. If it was broken low, a person on foot had been careless. If you had to cross water, do not enter where you want to leave. Enter upstream. Let the water lie for you. Caleb learned fast. That was part of what made the memory painful. He had been bright, too bright for a world built to punish black intelligence unless it could be turned into labor. Baptiste had watched him take in details that grown men missed: a tilted blade of grass, a boot print filling with water, a dog losing confidence at the edge of a creek. The boy had once smiled when he understood something before being told. Baptiste had warned him not to smile too openly. Even joy could be reported. Those memories did not soften the present. They sharpened it, because now, somewhere beyond the fog, Caleb was using those same lessons against people trying to survive. The plantation had taken a father's instruction and reversed its purpose. That was not accident. That was design. Systems of control often survive by stealing what the oppressed build for protection and forcing it into service of the oppressor. A song becomes surveillance. A skilled hand becomes forced profit. A child taught to read land becomes a hunter of fugitives. Caleb did not become valuable to the master because he abandoned his past. He became valuable because he remembered it. After the sale, Baptiste heard almost nothing for years. That was how family separation worked. It did not need to kill memory. It only needed to deny information. A child could be taken 10 miles away or 3 states away, and the silence did the rest. No address, no letter, no legal claim, no right to demand a name from the buyer. Parents were left with rumors and guesses, which is another form of punishment. Baptiste heard once that Caleb had been sent south, then that he had been trained around dogs, then that a young black tracker had helped recover 2 runaways near the river road. No one said it was Caleb with certainty. No one wanted to be the person who brought that truth to a father. Then, months before the bayou hunt, Baptiste saw him at a distance. The yard had been busy with wagon traffic. A man in a dark coat stood near the stable with 2 hounds tied to a post. He did not laugh with the white men. He did not lower his head like a field hand under direct order. He stood in the strange space plantation systems sometimes created for the enslaved men they used against others, trusted with violence, denied freedom, rewarded with proximity, never allowed dignity. Baptiste knew him by the way he shifted his weight. Caleb had always favored his left foot after stepping on a shell as a child. The man by the stable turned. For 1 second their eyes met. No greeting came. A white overseer stepped between them. Caleb looked away. That was their reunion. No embrace, no explanation, no accusation, just the recognition of a bond the plantation had no intention of allowing to heal. Later, Baptiste learned the rest in fragments. Caleb had a wife on a nearby holding, a young child too. The master controlled whether they stayed together or disappeared into sale. Caleb was given small privileges, but every privilege had a hook in it. Extra food, better boots, permission to see his family, protection from the worst punishments as long as he remained useful. This is how coercion disguises itself. The record may call a man a tracker. It may call him loyal. It may call him skilled. It may never write down the hostage behind the skill, but the hostage was there. Caleb's usefulness depended on a threat that did not have to be spoken every day. It only had to be understood. Do what you are told, and your child remains near. Fail, and the child is gone. In the swamp, Baptiste moved from the cypress roots only after the last lantern had thinned into the trees. His legs resisted when he stood. Cold water dragged at his clothes. He did not hurry. Speed left marks. Pain left mistakes. He moved toward higher ground, then stopped before reaching it. High ground was where men expected fugitives to go after hiding in water. Instead, he turned back into the lower marsh and crossed through a stretch of bitter weeds. He crushed them against his sleeves. Their smell was sharp enough to cover sweat for a short distance. Behind him, the hunt shifted. A dog barked twice, then cut off. That meant Caleb had checked it. Baptiste understood the message. Caleb was still in control of the animals. The white men had not taken the lead. That was dangerous, but it also gave Baptiste one narrow advantage. Caleb could read him, but Baptiste could read Caleb too. A stranger would follow the obvious false trail. Caleb would reject it. So Baptiste began laying signs that only Caleb would understand as deliberate. A footprint placed too cleanly near a root. A broken reed angled west when the ground suggested east. A strip of cloth caught where no desperate man would leave it by accident. These were not mistakes. They were invitations. The point was not to escape the search party yet. The point was to steer it. Baptiste had to pull Caleb and the hunters away from the real crossing where the children and elders were moving. He had to make himself the center of the night. Every shout, every dog, every lantern had to turn toward him. That meant letting Caleb believe he was closing in. It also meant trusting that Caleb still had enough of his father inside him to understand without exposing either of them. That was a brutal gamble. Blood alone did not guarantee mercy. Suffering did not automatically make a man brave. A threatened father could become obedient in ways that destroyed another father. Baptiste knew that. He did not excuse what Caleb had done. He did not turn betrayal into innocence simply because there was a reason behind it, but he had seen the red cord. He had seen hesitation. He had seen Caleb point the dogs away. Those facts mattered. The next exchange happened near a fallen gum tree. Baptiste crossed the mud beside it, leaving one partial print. Then he climbed backward over the trunk and dropped into a shallow run of water. The move was difficult. His shoulder struck bark. He held back a sound. Pain moved through him, but he kept going. Minutes later, the hunters reached the tree. Baptiste lay flat in the dark water beyond a screen of grass, close enough to hear. One white man said, "He went over." Another said, "Dogs have him." Caleb said nothing. The dogs pulled toward the visible print. Caleb crouched. He studied the bark. His hand passed over the mark Baptiste's shoulder had left. Then Caleb looked toward the water. For a moment, Baptiste thought it was over. Caleb had seen the true route. The son knew the father's body had struck that tree. He knew the print was staged. He knew Baptiste was close. The overseer stepped beside him. Well, Caleb stood. "He is trying to make us waste time in the water," Caleb said. "He went north." It was a lie told in the voice of obedience. The men believed him because they needed his skill but did not respect his mind enough to suspect his choice. That arrogance saved lives. They moved north. Baptiste stayed still until they passed. He did not smile. There was nothing clean to celebrate. Caleb had protected him for one moment, but the hunt continued. The master still held Caleb's family. The hidden route was still at risk. The children were still somewhere ahead, moving through darkness with fear pressed over their mouths. Baptiste rose again. Now the night had changed into a silent conversation between father and son. Baptiste left a sign. Caleb misread it out loud. Baptiste shifted the trail. Caleb slowed the dogs. Neither man could speak the truth. Every honest word would be evidence. Every visible act of mercy could become a sentence against Caleb's wife and child. So they used the only language left to them: mud, water, hesitation, false direction. This was not reconciliation. It was not forgiveness. It was a temporary fracture in the machine. And inside that fracture, people could move. Farther east, the first group reached the Black Channel. A young man Baptiste trusted guided them into a narrow boat hidden under reeds. The baby was passed first, then the girl. Then the elder, shaking but silent. No lantern was lit. A hand covered the side of the boat where pale wood might catch moonlight. Behind them, the barking grew louder. The hunt was being pulled away, but not far enough. Baptiste knew he needed a stronger move. He needed the master to believe the capture was close. He needed the entire force to turn toward one target, so he did something he had avoided all night. He let the dogs catch his real scent. Not for long, just enough. He took the cloth from his sleeve, rubbed it against his neck, and tied it to a low branch where the wind would carry the smell across the path. Then he crossed into a shallow pool and waited until the first hound struck the scent and exploded forward. The sound changed immediately. No more searching barks, no more uncertainty. Now the dogs believed. Men shouted. Boots broke through brush. A lantern fell and hissed in wet ground. Caleb's voice cut through the chaos, ordering them to hold the line, but the hunters were excited now. They thought the old man had made his mistake. Baptiste moved toward the dangerous ground, not fast. Precisely. Ahead lay a section of bayou where the surface looked firm under leaves, but beneath it was soft collapse. A man stepping wrong would sink to the thigh. A horse could panic. Dogs could lose scent in the churned mud and standing water. Baptiste had warned Caleb about that place when he was a boy. Never trust land that looks too still. Now he was leading his son back to the lesson. The father had taught the child how to survive it. The question was whether the grown man would remember in time. The first real consequence of Caleb's lie came quickly. The hunters moved north because Caleb told them to. They cut through brush, dragged the dogs over wet roots, and pushed toward firmer ground where Baptiste had not gone. For several minutes that false direction bought time. Not much. In a hunt, minutes could be the difference between a child reaching a boat and a child being dragged back before dawn. But the lie also created risk. The overseer began to doubt him. Baptiste could hear it in the voices behind him. Men do not have to speak truth to reveal suspicion. Their tone changes, their questions become shorter, their footsteps move closer to the man they no longer fully trust. "You sure?" one of them asked Caleb. Caleb answered without emotion. "I know his trail. The overseer spat into the mud. "You better." There it was, the threat inside the command. Caleb's position was never secure. The plantation used him, but it did not trust him. It needed his knowledge, but despised the source of it. He could handle the dogs. He could read the swamp. He could be sent ahead of armed white men, but one wrong move, one failed hunt, one sign of hesitation, and all the small protections around him would vanish. That was how the system managed men like Caleb. It gave them just enough power to make others fear them, never enough power to protect themselves. Baptiste moved low through a strip of cane and stopped near a shallow depression filled with brown water. He did not enter it. The water there held too still. Beneath the floating leaves was soft mud that could grip a leg to the knee. A young man could fight out of it. An older man might not. He circled left and pressed one hand into the mud, leaving a print at the edge. Then he wiped his palm across the bark of a tree. It was deliberate, a mark Caleb would notice, a sign that said, "I am leading them." Then Baptiste withdrew into the shadow of a broken cypress and waited. This was no longer escape alone. It had become communication under surveillance. Every movement had to carry two meanings, one for the hunters, one for Caleb. The hunters had to believe Baptiste was weakening. Caleb had to understand that Baptiste was choosing the ground. The dogs reached the depression first. Their bodies stiffened. One pulled toward the handprint. Another circled, confused by the scent broken across bark and water. The men arrived behind them, breathing hard, irritated by the mud. Caleb crouched. His fingers did not touch the print. He had been taught better than that. He looked at it, then at the tree, then at the water. Baptiste saw the moment the memory returned. Years earlier, Caleb had slipped near a place like this. He had been a boy, overconfident, stepping where the ground looked flat. The mud swallowed his foot and pulled him down hard. Baptiste had caught him by the back of his shirt before panic took over. "Don't fight down," Baptiste had told him. "Spread your weight, crawl out." The boy had obeyed, shaking, humiliated. Baptiste had not comforted him immediately. He made him look at the surface again. "What fooled you?" Caleb, angry and embarrassed, had said nothing. "The leaves," Baptiste said. "They made it look like land." Now the same lesson stood between them. The overseer stepped forward, impatient. "Put the dogs through." Caleb did not move. The overseer looked at him. "I said put them through." Caleb's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes on the water. "Ground won't hold." The overseer laughed once, dry and mean. "You afraid of mud now?" Caleb did not answer. Another white man pushed past him with one of the dogs, trying to force the animal toward the depression. The dog resisted. The man cursed and yanked the lead. The animal lunged, slipped, and sank chest deep into the soft mud. The surface broke open at once. What had looked like shallow ground became a sucking pit of water, leaves, and black silt. The man stumbled after it. His boot went under. He grabbed at a branch and shouted. The whole line stopped. No one died. That mattered. This was not a story that needed spectacle. The violence was already present in the purpose of the hunt. The danger did not have to become theatrical to be real, but the delay was enough. 2 men had to pull the dog out. Another cut the lead. The overseer's boot came up without its sole. Lantern light shook across the trees. The search party lost formation. Their confidence broke into anger. Baptiste slipped away during the confusion. Behind him, Caleb said nothing. That silence was another choice. The master arrived shortly after. Baptiste did not see him at first. He heard the change in the men before he heard the horse. Voices lowered. Complaints stopped. The hunt reorganized itself around the man who owned the plantation and believed ownership made him the author of every life there. His name did not matter as much as his function. Men like him appear again and again in records under different names. owner, planter, executor, creditor, gentleman. The language tries to make them administrative. The acts reveal what they were. He rode as far as the ground allowed, then dismounted with help from an overseer. His boots were not made for swamp work. That, too, was part of the truth. The men who claimed land often knew it less intimately than the people they forced to labor on it. The master's first question was not whether anyone was hurt. It was whether Baptiste had been taken. When told no, he turned to Caleb. Baptiste watched from behind a screen of hanging moss, close enough to see the lantern light on Caleb's face. "You know him," the master said. Caleb stood still. "Yes." "You know how he thinks." "Yes." "You know where he would run." A pause. "Yes." The master stepped closer, then stopped following him like a son. No one spoke after that. The sentence landed cleanly. It exposed the entire structure of the night. The master understood the blood tie. He did not ignore it. He used it. He named it only to order its destruction. Stop following him like a son. Hunt him like property. Caleb's face did not change, but Baptiste saw his right hand close around the dog lead until the knuckles rose under the skin. The master continued. "Your wife is still where I left her. Your boy, too." There was the blade, finally shown, not shouted, not dramatized, stated as a business fact. The plantation did not need to invent cruelty in moments of anger. Its ordinary sentences were cruel enough. Caleb lowered his eyes. The master leaned in. "Bring him back before sunrise. Bring back whoever he's hiding, or don't ask where I send yours." That was the full mechanism. A father forced to hunt his father to keep his child. A system that made obedience look like betrayal and betrayal look like survival. Baptiste had suspected it. Now he had heard it. The red cord had not lied. Caleb was trapped, but not innocent. That distinction mattered. He had led dogs after people. He had caused fear. He had become dangerous. Pain explained him. It did not erase the harm. Baptiste knew this with a clarity that hurt more than anger. His son was both wounded and weaponized. The master turned away, ordering the men to spread east and west. He wanted the swamp combed. He wanted the children found. He wanted names. He wanted the hidden root broken before it became rumor, before rumor became courage, before courage became movement. Baptiste could not let the search widen. He needed to collapse it inward again. He picked up a stone from the edge of the water, weighed it once in his hand, and threw it hard into the brush south of the line. The sound cracked through the dark. Every head turned. A dog barked, then another. A man shouted, "There!" Caleb looked toward the sound, then toward the place where Baptiste was hidden. For the first time that night, father and son saw each other clearly. Only for a second. Baptiste stood behind the moss, half covered in mud, eyes fixed on Caleb. No plea, no signal a white man would understand. Just recognition. Caleb's face hardened immediately because the others were watching. "There," Caleb said, pointing toward the sound Baptiste had made. "He's breaking south." The hunters surged. Baptiste moved before they could close. He did not run blindly. He used their noise against them. When men crash through swamp brush, they hide smaller sounds. He crossed behind the broken cypress, passed through knee-deep water, and moved toward the old channel where the real danger waited. The search party followed the direction Caleb gave them. This time, it was not entirely false. Baptiste wanted them south. He wanted the master's attention fixed there. He wanted the eastward crossing left unguarded. The cost was distance. The hunters were closer now. A branch cut Baptiste's cheek. He ignored it. His breath came harder. His left leg dragged for 3 steps before he forced it steady. Age was no longer a fact in the background. It was present in his body. The swamp that had protected him also demanded payment. Behind him, Caleb's voice ordered the dogs to slow. The overseer shouted over him, "Let them run!" Caleb snapped back, You'll lose them in the water. It was a practical answer, safe enough to survive scrutiny. It also bought Baptiste a few more seconds. Those seconds went east. Far from the hunt, the hidden group reached the second crossing. The young guide Baptiste had sent ahead found the marked tree, 3 cuts low on the bark, almost invisible unless someone knew to look. Behind it, reeds had been tied back to conceal a narrow passage. The boat there was smaller. It could not carry everyone at once. That meant waiting. Waiting was where fear did its worst work. The baby began to stir. The mother pressed the child close, rocking without sound. One of the boys looked back toward the barking. The elder put a hand on his shoulder and forced him to face forward. No speeches, no promises. Just hands moving people through danger. This was resistance as logistics, not a grand charge, not a clean battlefield, a boat hidden in reeds. A child kept silent. A root remembered, a man drawing the hunt onto himself because someone had to. Baptiste reached the old channel and stopped. Ahead lay water dark enough to hide depth. On the far side, cypress knees rose from the mud like broken stakes. To the left was a strip of false ground covered by leaves. To the right, a narrow ridge that could hold one person if he knew where to step. Baptiste knew. Caleb knew. The white hunters did not. This was where the next move had to happen. Baptiste stepped onto the ridge, leaving one visible print before shifting his weight to the hidden root beneath the surface. Then he crossed to a low rise and turned back. He wanted them to see him now. Not fully, just enough. A lantern beam found his shoulder. "There!" The shout came from the overseer. The dogs lunged. Caleb pulled them hard, too hard. One of the men noticed. "What are you holding for?" Caleb answered, "The ground breaks." The overseer raised his gun toward the dark, not to shoot cleanly, but to threaten movement, then flush him. The master had reached the rear of the line again, furious, breathing hard, face slick with sweat and swamp damp. He looked less like power now, and more like what power becomes when land refuses to obey it. "Take him," he ordered. Caleb did not move. The master's voice dropped. "Remember your boy." Baptiste heard it. That was the moment the night became unbearable in its precision. One father on the ridge, one son below, one child far away being used as a chain neither of them could touch. Baptiste understood that Caleb could not stall much longer. So he gave him a reason not to. Baptiste stepped out where the lanterns could see his full body. The hunters froze for half a breath. Mud covered him from chest to foot. His shirt clung to him. His hands were empty. His face was calm in the way men become calm when every acceptable choice has been taken away. Caleb stared at him. Baptiste spoke only loud enough for the first line to hear. "You still remember what I taught you?" The overseer shouted, "Hands up!" Baptiste did not raise them yet. His eyes stayed on Caleb. "But you better remember why." Then Baptiste turned and moved along the ridge, drawing the men toward the false ground. The dogs followed the scent. The hunters followed the dogs. And Caleb, trapped between command and blood, had to decide how much of his father's lesson he was willing to betray. The ridge held under Baptiste's feet because he knew where the roots ran beneath the mud. The hunters did not. They saw only a man in front of them, half lit by lanterns, close enough to take. That was the weakness Baptiste needed. The hunt had trained them to follow motion, not terrain. They trusted the dogs, the guns, the numbers, and Caleb's forced guidance. They did not trust the swamp because they had never had to learn it honestly. Baptiste moved 3 steps across the narrow rise, then stopped where the ground dipped under leaves. Behind him, the dogs strained forward. Caleb held the lead lines tight. The overseer shoved toward him. "Loose them!" Caleb did not look back. "Not here." The master's voice cut in from behind the men. I gave an order. Caleb's hand tightened. The red cord at his wrist was dark now, wet against his skin. Baptiste saw it. So did no one else. That was the cruelty of the thing. The chain that mattered most was not iron. It was private. It lived in threats spoken low, in loved ones held out of sight, in the knowledge that punishment could travel through your family before it reached your own body. Baptiste stepped again, slowly, making sure the hunters saw his movement. One man raised a gun. The master snapped, "Alive." That single word confirmed the truth. Baptiste was more valuable breathing because he carried the hidden root inside him. They did not want only his body returned. They wanted names, crossings, helpers, timing, the entire underground logic of survival. They wanted to turn memory into evidence. Baptiste lowered his hand toward the mud, a signal, but not one the hunters knew. Across the channel, in the low cover beyond the reeds, a woman named Ruth saw it. She had been waiting there with two others, almost submerged behind a fallen tree. Her job was not to fight. Her job was to cut the last visible sign of the true crossing. She carried no weapon, only a short blade used for rope and cane stalks. When Baptiste's hand lowered, she moved. Quietly, she sliced through the reed bundle that marked the concealed passage. The reeds drifted apart, then settled back as if untouched. Behind her, the last boat slid into deeper water, with 3 children pressed flat against its bottom. The master was watching Baptiste. The escape was happening behind his back. This was how survival often worked under slavery. Not as one heroic act, but as many small acts performed at the same time by people whose names were never written down. One man became visible, others disappeared. One person drew attention. Another erased a footprint, another held a child's mouth shut, with trembling fingers, not from cruelty, but because sound could destroy everyone. Baptiste began moving again. The dogs surged. Caleb fought them back. The overseer, enraged, grabbed one lead himself. That was the break. The dog lunged onto the false ground. The leaves collapsed. The animal dropped chest deep into mud and water, thrashing in panic. The overseer stumbled after it, one leg sinking hard. A second man grabbed his coat and nearly went down with him. Lantern lights swung wildly. Men shouted over one another. The line broke again, but this time the disorder spread farther. Baptiste did not run. He stood still long enough to make them look at him. That was deliberate. A fleeing man would have vanished. A baited man holds the eye. Caleb turned toward him, and for a moment the mask cracked. Not fully, not safely, but enough. Baptiste saw fear there. Not fear of the swamp. Fear of failing both directions. If Caleb helped too openly, his wife and child would pay. If he obeyed fully, his father and the hidden families would be lost. The plantation had built a trap where every exit required betrayal. That was the point. Systems like this did not only punish resistance. They engineered moral injury. They forced people into actions that would haunt them afterward, then used that shame to keep them silent. The master moved closer, furious now. "Get him!" Caleb stepped onto the only safe path. He knew it because Baptiste had taught him. His feet found the hidden root under the water. His body remembered the old lesson, even while his face remained hard for the men behind him. Baptiste waited. The distance between father and son closed to 10 steps, then 7, then 5. The swamp quieted around them, not completely. The dogs still struggled. Men cursed. Water slapped against the bank, but the center of the night narrowed to 2 men standing on a strip of ground too thin for both truth and survival. Caleb spoke first, low. "You should have kept running," Baptiste answered without raising his voice. "I am." Caleb's eyes shifted once toward the east. Baptiste understood. The boats had moved. At least some had crossed. The words between them had to remain clean enough to survive witnesses. Every sentence needed a false surface. The overseer shouted, "Take him, Caleb!" Caleb lifted the rope from his belt. Baptiste looked at it, then at his son. "You remember the deep water near Belle Route?" Baptiste asked. Caleb's face hardened. "Quiet. You cried there once. Quiet. I pulled you out." Caleb stepped closer. The master was near enough now to hear tone, but not every word. Baptiste did not soften. He could not afford softness. He was not trying to comfort Caleb. He was trying to force memory into the room the master had built inside him. "I taught you how not to sink." Caleb looped the rope around Baptiste's wrists. His hands moved efficiently, not cruelly, not gently. Efficiency was safer than tenderness. Baptiste leaned close enough that only Caleb could hear. "Then don't sink now." Caleb pulled the knot tight. For 1 second, the pressure hurt. Baptiste did not react. Pain was information. Reaction was evidence. The overseer arrived, breathing hard, mud to his thighs, anger sharpened by humiliation. He seized Baptiste by the shoulder and shoved him toward the bank. Caleb moved with them, keeping one hand on the rope, controlling the appearance of custody. To the hunters, the capture had happened. To Baptiste, the trap had entered its second stage. The master demanded immediate answers. "Where are the others?" Baptiste looked at him. No reply. The overseer struck him across the face with an open hand. Not a graphic injury, a routine one. That was what made it condemning. Violence did not arrive as an exception on plantations. It was administration by other means. Caleb's grip tightened on the rope. The master noticed. "You have something to say?" Caleb lowered his eyes. "No." Baptiste swallowed blood and stayed upright. The master stepped closer. "You ran with children." Silence. "You had help." Silence. "You think mud can hide a conspiracy?" Baptiste finally spoke. "I think men who fear children running know what they are." The overseer raised his hand again, but the master stopped him. "Not here." Alive, again, the same calculation. They needed Baptiste able to speak later. The cruelty could wait until it had a roof over it. That was another kind of record. Not what men did in anger, but what they postponed for usefulness. The hunters began pulling back from the channel. They believed the night had turned in their favor. They had the man they wanted most. The dogs were recovered. The master had his prize. But the swamp had changed behind them. The eastern crossing was empty. The reed marker was gone. The last boat had pushed into a narrow black lane between cypress trunks, moving without oars at first, guided by hands against roots. The passengers did not know whether Baptiste was alive. They did not know whether Caleb had helped or betrayed them. They only knew the instruction given before the escape began: do not stop for one man if stopping loses all. That was the terrible discipline of collective survival. Ruth stayed behind until she heard the hunters retreat. Then she backed into the water and let herself drift under the shadow of a fallen trunk. She watched them pass with Baptiste bound between Caleb and the overseer. The master walked ahead, angry but satisfied. The overseer limped. The dogs moved uneasily, their confidence damaged. Caleb kept his face empty. Baptiste saw Ruth only once, a faint shape behind the roots. He gave no sign of recognition. Recognition could kill her. Instead, he stumbled deliberately, drawing the overseer's attention back to him. The shove came hard. Baptiste went to one knee. Caleb caught the rope before the overseer could drag him face first through the mud. "Careful," Caleb said. "Master wants him talking." The overseer glared, but the logic held. Baptiste rose. There it was again, protection hidden inside usefulness. Caleb could not say, "Do not hurt my father." So he said, "Do not damage the property you want to question." The words were ugly. They were also the only shield available. This is what slavery did to language. It made human care disguise itself in the vocabulary of ownership. They marched him back through the swamp as dawn began to thin the dark. Birds started calling from the high branches. The sound felt indecently ordinary. A night of betrayal, coercion, and escape had passed beneath them, and the world still performed mourning. At the edge of the bayou, the master stopped and turned to Caleb. "You will find the rest." Caleb said, "Yes." "You will take me to the crossing." Caleb paused only a fraction. "There may not be one." The master stared at him. Caleb continued, voice flat. He broke trail through water. He doubled back. He used old animal paths. If others ran, they scattered. Baptiste stood silent, head lowered. That explanation was plausible because it contained enough truth. Baptiste had broken trail through water. He had doubled back. He had used animal paths. Lies survive best when they are built from facts arranged in the wrong order. The master looked from Caleb to Baptiste. "I will have the truth before noon." No one answered. But the truth he wanted was already moving away from him, carried in a hidden boat through cypress fog. A baby who had not cried. A girl who had watched everything. Two boys who would remember the night an old man let himself be taken. An elder who would carry the root in silence until it was safe to speak. Baptiste understood the cost now. He had not escaped, not in the ordinary sense. The rope on his wrists was real. The plantation waited ahead. The master's questions would come. Caleb's family remained under threat. Nothing was clean. Nothing was finished, but the hidden road still lived. And Caleb, walking beside him, had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. He had lied once to protect his father, then again to protect the root. The plantation had ordered him to hunt blood. Instead, in the narrow space left to him, he had begun to misdirect the men who held his child. Baptiste did not look at him. Not yet. The time for open recognition had not come. But as they left the swamp, father and son walked close enough for the rope between them to slacken, only slightly, only for a few steps. In that small slack, dangerous and nearly invisible, the first act of resistance passed from one generation to the next. By the time they reached the plantation road, dawn had exposed the damage. Mud covered the men from knee to waist. One dog limped. Another refused the lead and kept pulling back toward the swamp, no longer certain of the ground beneath it. The overseer's face carried the humiliation of a man who had shouted orders at land he did not understand and been answered by mud. Baptiste walked between Caleb and the overseer with rope around his wrists. He did not look defeated. That angered them. The plantation waited ahead in the gray light, still and watchful. Cabins stood with doors half open. No one stepped out fully. No one wanted to be seen looking too closely, but eyes were there behind cracks, behind hanging cloth, behind hands pressed against wooden frames. They saw Baptiste brought back. They saw Caleb holding the rope. They saw the master walking ahead as if the night belonged to him. That was the image the plantation wanted. The old man captured, the son obedient, the hidden resistance broken. But images can lie. A woman near the wash shed lowered her eyes when Caleb passed, not in submission, in calculation. She saw the slack in the rope. She saw Baptiste's hands tied in front, not behind. She saw that Caleb kept his body angled between Baptiste and the overseer whenever the road narrowed. Small details, dangerous details. On plantations, survival often depended on reading what was not officially said. The master ordered everyone back to work before the sun fully rose. That was not because the work mattered more than the hunt. It was because routine was a weapon. After terror, he wanted the fields moving. After escape, he wanted bodies bent over rows. After a night that proved people could still vanish, he wanted the appearance of control restored before breakfast. But the quarters did not return to ordinary silence. This silence was different. It held knowledge. The missing were not in the cabins. 3 children, a mother, an elder, 2 boys. Others whose absence would be counted soon. The master did not yet know how many. He knew only that his night had produced 1 captured man and too much unanswered space. Baptiste was taken to the yard behind the storehouse, not the field, not the jail shed yet. They wanted him seen first. Public display was part of punishment. It taught witnesses what happened to those who ran. It also tried to teach despair to those who had helped. But that morning, the lesson did not land as intended, because Baptiste was standing. Because the children were gone, because Caleb, the hunter, had not brought them back. The master faced him in front of the gathered workers. "Tell them," he said. Baptiste looked at him. The master's voice sharpened. "Tell them what happens when a man thinks the swamp can save him." Baptiste said nothing. The overseer stepped forward, but the master raised a hand. He wanted words first. Violence would come later if needed. A confession was more useful than a wound. A confession could become fear. A confession could name helpers. A confession could turn the community against itself. The master turned toward the others. "This man led children into fever water. He left them to drown in the dark." That was the first official lie of the morning. It was not enough to capture Baptiste. The master had to corrupt the meaning of what he had done. Resistance had to be renamed recklessness. Protection had to be renamed danger. Escape had to be made to sound like murder. This is how power defends itself after failing. It rewrites the motive. Baptiste lifted his head. The yard went still. "No child drowned," he said. The words were plain, controlled, more dangerous because they were not shouted. The master stepped closer. "Then where are they?" Baptiste did not answer. The question moved through the yard like a blade. Everyone understood the trap. If Baptiste said they lived, he confirmed escape. If he said where, he betrayed them. If he said nothing, punishment would fall on him, and perhaps on others chosen at random. Caleb stood at the edge of the circle, still holding the rope. The master looked at him. "Ask him." Caleb did not move. The master's eyes narrowed. "I said, ask him." Caleb stepped forward until he stood in front of Baptiste. Father and son faced each other in daylight now. No fog, no roots, no swamp to conceal what they were to each other. The workers watched without appearing to watch. Caleb spoke in the voice he used for patrols. "Where did they go?" Baptiste looked at his son. There were 1,000 answers between them. "Into water, into memory, into the road you helped leave open, into the only future your child may have if you can keep lying well enough." But aloud, Baptiste said, "You followed me all night." "You tell him." The words struck harder than defiance. They shifted the burden. Caleb's face remained closed. The master watched him carefully. Caleb turned. "He broke the trail before the second channel," he said. "Dogs lost the group there, if there was a group." The final sentence mattered. If there was a group. It gave the master less than he wanted. It gave the workers more than they needed. It turned certainty into fog. It made the escape harder to prove. The overseer barked, "There was a group. We saw tracks." Caleb answered, "We saw old tracks, dog churn and swamp wash." The overseer stepped toward him. "You calling me blind?" Caleb held his stare a second too long, then lowered it. "No." Not obedience. Timing. The master intervened before the argument exposed too much. "Enough." He ordered Baptiste taken to the shed. That should have ended the scene, but the master made one more mistake. He wanted to wound the father through the son in public. Men who rely on domination often become careless when they believe an audience is fully afraid. He turned to Caleb. "You did well enough to keep your boy near for now." The yard heard it, not all of it perhaps, not every word, but enough. The secret became larger than the red cord. Now others knew the terms. Caleb's child was leverage. His wife was leverage. His obedience had a hostage behind it. That did not absolve him. But it changed how the watching people understood him. He was still dangerous. He was still the man who had led dogs through the swamp. But he was also marked by the same machine, bent into a shape useful to the master. Baptiste saw the reaction ripple through the yard. Eyes shifted, then dropped. A man near the fence clenched his jaw. An older woman turned her face away, not from shame, but from recognition. Everyone there knew what it meant to have love turned into a handle for control. The master did not notice. He believed fear traveled only downward from him. He did not understand that information could travel sideways among the people he tried to command. Baptiste was pulled toward the shed. As he passed Caleb, his bound hands brushed against his son's wrist, only for a second. Enough to touch the red cord. Caleb flinched. Baptiste did not look at him. The gesture was not forgiveness, it was acknowledgement. I know the chain. I know what they are holding over you. I know why the knife is in your hand. That knowledge did not heal the betrayal, but it prevented the master from owning its meaning entirely. Inside the shed, the air was close and hot even in the morning. Tools hung along one wall, rope, harness, broken boards, the ordinary equipment of plantation life, all of it capable of becoming punishment when placed in the wrong hands. Baptiste was seated on a low bench. His wrists remained tied. The master entered with Caleb and the overseer. No crowd now. This was where the questions could become more direct. The master stood before him. Who cut the reeds? Baptiste remained silent. Who had the boat? Silence. Which way did they go? Silence. The overseer leaned close. You think they'll come back for you? Baptiste looked at him. No. The answer unsettled him because it carried no despair. The master understood it better. Baptiste did not expect rescue. That meant he had chosen capture. The realization sharpened the master's anger. You gave yourself up. Baptiste said nothing. The master turned to Caleb. You hear that? He used you. Caleb did not answer. He made you chase him while the rest ran. Still no answer. The master stepped closer to Caleb now, changing the target. And you let him. The shed tightened around the words. Caleb's life narrowed to the space between one breath and the next. If he denied too quickly, it would sound rehearsed. If he hesitated too long, it would sound true. He left scent, Caleb said. He showed himself. He wanted us south. The overseer snapped. That's what he's saying. Caleb turned slightly. That is what he did. A man can be clever without being helped. It was a dangerous defense because it protected them both. It admitted Baptiste's intelligence while denying Caleb's cooperation. It offered the master an explanation his pride could accept. He had been outplayed by Baptiste, not betrayed by his tracker. The master studied him. Then he smiled without warmth. You admire him. Caleb said, I know him. The answer landed between father and son like a closed door with light beneath it. The master looked back at Baptiste. Then know this, if the others are not found, someone pays for every missing head. There it was again, collective punishment. The old arithmetic of terror. If the exact person could not be caught, the system would choose another body and call it order. Baptiste finally spoke. They are not heads. The master frowned. Baptiste continued, voice steady. They are children, women, old people, names you never bothered to learn unless you meant to sell them. The overseer moved, but the master held him back again. He did not want Baptiste silenced yet. Anger was making the old man speak, and speech could become useful. Names, then, the master said. Give me names. Baptiste leaned back against the wall. No. A simple word, not loud. Not heroic in the cheap sense, just final. The master's face changed. He had reached the wall inside Baptiste and found no door. Outside the shed, the plantation had begun to move. Field bells rang. People walked toward labor with tools in hand and information hidden behind their eyes. By noon, the story would have traveled in pieces. Baptiste taken, children gone. Caleb threatened, master uncertain, root not found. Those pieces mattered. A rebellion does not always begin with a shout. Sometimes it begins when the powerless discover that the powerful can be deceived. Inside, Caleb was ordered to escort Baptiste to the holding room. The overseer protested. The master refused him. Let the son carry what he caught. Again, he tried to make kinship into humiliation. Caleb took the rope. They walked through a narrow passage behind the storehouse, out of sight for only a few seconds. A few seconds were enough. Baptiste spoke without turning. Your boy. Caleb's hand tightened. What is his name? Caleb did not answer at first. Then, very low, Jonas. Baptiste absorbed it. A grandson, a name, a life held hostage by a man who had no right to either. Does he know the water? Baptiste asked. Caleb's voice nearly broke, but he controlled it. No, then teach him. Caleb stopped walking. The rope between them went slack again. For the first time since the swamp, Caleb was not performing for white witnesses. There was no lantern, no hound, no overseer in immediate earshot, only the passage, the wall, and the ruined remains of what should have been a family. I hunted you, Caleb said. Baptiste looked forward. Yes. I tied your hands. Yes. A pause. I kept them alive. Baptiste turned, then slowly. He looked at his son not as a child returned, not as a man forgiven, but as a man standing inside the wreckage of choices made under threat. You kept the road alive, Baptiste said. Caleb swallowed. That was all. No embrace, no absolution, no clean ending offered where none had been earned. The door opened ahead. The overseer's voice called from outside, impatient. Caleb pulled the rope tight again before anyone could see. The performance resumed, but something had passed between them in the narrow passage. Not peace, not trust. A task. Teach Jonas. Remember the water. Keep lying until the living are beyond reach. Baptiste entered the holding room with his wrists bound, but the night's work had not failed. The capture had not ended the resistance. It had transferred it. The father had become the visible cost. The son had become the hidden witness. And somewhere beyond the bayou, the children were still moving. By noon, the plantation had failed to become ordinary again. The fields moved, but slowly. Hoes struck earth without rhythm. People bent over the rows, but their attention stayed on the storehouse, on the shed, on the road that led back toward the bayou. The master wanted labor to erase the night. It did not. Everybody in the field knew that absence had entered the plantation and refused to leave. 3 children were gone. A mother was gone. An elder was gone. Others were missing from their places, and no order could make that fact disappear. Baptiste sat in the holding room with his wrists tied and his back against a plank wall. Heat gathered beneath the roof. Flies moved in the corners. Outside, men argued in low voices. Horses shifted. Dogs slept in the shade, exhausted and uncertain. He had not given the root. That was the first fact. Caleb had not given it either. That was the second. The master still had power, but now he also had ignorance. Ignorance enraged men who believed ownership entitled them to every answer. The door opened. The master entered without the overseer this time. Caleb came behind him. One armed man stayed outside. The absence of the overseer was not mercy, it was strategy. The master wanted a more private kind of pressure. He looked at Baptiste first. You cost me 6. Baptiste did not answer. Maybe more. Still silence. The master stepped closer. You think that is victory? Baptiste lifted his eyes. No. The answer seemed to please the master for half a second. He mistook it for surrender. Then Baptiste continued, "It is survival." The master's expression hardened. There was no speech in him now about law, order, duty, or property. Those words were costumes. What stood in the room was simpler. A man angry that people he claimed had acted with will. He turned to Caleb. "Tell him what happens next." Caleb stood near the wall, face controlled. The master waited. Caleb said nothing. The silence lasted too long. The master's hand moved quickly. He did not strike Caleb. He took the red cord from Caleb's wrist and pulled it tight between two fingers. Baptiste watched. The threat had become visible. "Your boy has a name, doesn't he?" the master asked. Caleb's face went still in a way Baptiste recognized, not calm. "Control under pressure," the master continued. "Jonas." Baptiste did not let his expression change, though the name had already entered him. A grandson, a child somewhere behind another fence, held as a guarantee against his father's conscience. The master looked between them and understood he had touched something. "Good," he said. "Now we speak plainly." Plainly. That was the word men used when cruelty no longer needed disguise. He told Caleb that riders would go to the neighboring holding before dusk. He told him that if the missing were not found, Caleb's wife would be moved first, the child after. Separate buyers, separate roads, no promise of return. He said it as if arranging transport. That was the obscenity of the system. It turned family destruction into scheduling. Caleb did not move. Baptiste did. Only slightly. His bound hands shifted against the rope. The master saw it. "There," he said softly, "now you understand." But he was wrong. Baptiste had understood before the master entered. He understood the system's method more clearly than the system understood itself. It believed terror made people predictable. Sometimes it did, sometimes it made them precise. The master faced Baptiste. "Give me the crossing and his family stays." There it was. The plantation's final bargain: betray the escaped to save the threatened, trade one bloodline against another, make survival compete with survival. Then blame the enslaved for whatever choice follows. Baptiste looked at Caleb. For the first time that day, the room allowed the truth to stand between them without fog. Caleb's eyes said what his mouth could not. "Do not give it." Baptiste saw the cost of that request. Caleb was not asking as a hero. He was asking as a father who might lose everything. He was asking Baptiste to let the threat remain, to refuse the one answer that might delay punishment. That kind of courage did not look clean. It looked like a man being carved open and staying silent. Baptiste turned back to the master. He ran alone. The master stared. Caleb's eyes lowered. The phrase entered the room like a weapon recovered from the swamp. He ran alone. It was Caleb's lie from the morning, now returned by Baptiste. Father and son placed the same falsehood between the master and the living. The master stepped close enough that Baptiste could smell tobacco on his breath. "You expect me to believe that?" Baptiste answered, "Believe what you can prove." That was the third fact of the day. The master had suspicion. He had anger, he had dogs, men, rope, and threats, but he did not have the route, he did not have the boats, he did not have the names. The people who escaped had not left him enough to turn memory into capture. He struck the wall beside Baptiste's head with his fist, not because it solved anything, but because power often performs itself when it cannot think. Caleb did not flinch. That mattered. The master saw it too. "You have until sundown," he told Caleb. "Find a trail, any trail." Then he left. The door remained open for a few seconds after him. Light cut across the floorboards. Dust moved through it. The armed man outside shifted, waiting. Caleb stood with the loosened red cord still hanging from his wrist. Baptiste spoke first. "Do not go east." Caleb looked at him. Baptiste kept his voice low. They will expect you to search where the water opens. Go west first. Waste them in dry cane. Let the dogs lose the night." Caleb's mouth tightened. "You are telling me how to fail. I am telling you how to survive failure." The distinction was severe. Baptiste was not giving his son forgiveness. He was giving him tactics, the only inheritance slavery had left available, how to endure the next hour without surrendering the future. Caleb stepped closer. "If they take Jonas, they may." The words were hard, almost cruel. Caleb's eyes sharpened. Baptiste did not soften them. "They may take him whether you obey or not. That is the truth they use against you. They make you believe the right betrayal will purchase mercy." Caleb looked away. Baptiste continued, "There is no safe bargain with a man who profits from breaking families." Outside, a horse snorted. A boot scraped the threshold. Time was short. Caleb leaned down, as if checking the rope around Baptiste's wrists. "Did they cross clean?" he asked. Baptiste gave no visible reaction. "Yes." "How many?" "Enough." It was not a number. Numbers could become evidence if repeated under pressure. Caleb understood. He tightened the rope just enough to make the scene look proper from the doorway. Then, with his thumb hidden by Baptiste's sleeve, he pressed something small into Baptiste's palm, a sliver of shell, sharp-edged. Not enough to free him quickly, enough to work at rope over time. Baptiste closed his fingers around it. Caleb straightened. For one brief moment, his face changed. The tracker disappeared. The child who had once been pulled from deep mud stood near the surface of the man. He whispered one word, "Father." No witness heard it. Baptiste did not answer with comfort. Comfort would have been false. Instead, he gave Caleb the only reply that still had weight. "Teach your boy the water." Caleb turned and left. The door closed. That evening, Caleb led the search west. The master sent 2 men with him, then 3 more. They found signs because Caleb made sure they found signs. Broken cane, scuffed bark, a thread of cloth caught on thorn. Nothing that mattered, nothing that led toward the hidden crossing. He performed competence carefully. Too little skill would condemn him. Too much truth would condemn others. He walked the edge between suspicion and usefulness until the sun began to fall. The dogs tired early. The men complained. The overseer argued that the trail had gone cold. Caleb agreed with him just enough to appear frustrated. By dark, the search had turned into circles. The missing remained missing. Far beyond the plantation's reach, the escaped group moved under cover of cypress and distance. The children slept in turns. The elder carried the route in memory. Ruth joined them after nightfall, soaked to the bone and shaking from exhaustion, but alive. No one cheered. They were not free in the complete sense. Danger still surrounded them. Patrols existed. Roads betrayed. Hunger waited, but they had crossed the first line. Sometimes history remembers freedom as a single door opening. Often it was not. Often it was one night survived, then another. One child kept out of sale, one name not spoken under threat, one path protected long enough to be used again. Back in the holding room, Baptiste worked the shell against the rope. Not to escape that hour. The guard was too close, the yard too watched. He knew that, but rope weakened before it broke. So did systems, though never fast enough for those inside them. By morning, the master had no answer, only anger. The search had failed. The dogs had failed. The tracker had failed in a way the master could not prove was betrayal. Baptiste had failed to confess, and the missing had become a fact larger than punishment. The master came one last time before ordering Baptiste moved. His face had the gray look of a man who had slept badly and blamed others for the limits of his power. He asked again, quieter now. "Where did they go?" Baptiste looked at him with tired eyes. The answer had already been given. It had been given in mud, in water, in silence, in the slack of a rope, in a sun's lie, in a boat moving through cypress fog. But aloud, Baptiste said only, "They went where you could not own them." The master stared at him. No record kept the full weight of that sentence. Men like Baptiste were rarely allowed the dignity of complete testimony. Their words survived in fragments, in memory, in the stories families carried when official pages chose not to see them. But the meaning is clear enough. The plantation tried to turn a son into a weapon. It succeeded for a time. That must be admitted. Caleb did lead the hounds. He did tie his father's hands. He did become dangerous under the pressure of threats. To erase that would be dishonest. The system's damage was real because it moved through real people, but it did not own the ending. When the decisive moment came, Caleb lied. Baptiste stayed silent. The root survived. The children lived beyond that night, and somewhere in the broken space between guilt and resistance, a father passed one last instruction to his son: teach the boy the water. That is the legacy slavery feared most. Not innocence, not perfect heroes, not stories clean enough to comfort the audience. What it feared was memory that could survive contamination, love that could return in code, kinship that could be bent, wounded, used, and still not fully destroyed. Baptiste was taken from the holding room before sunset. Caleb stood in the yard as it happened. He did not reach for him. He did not speak. Too many eyes were watching. Too many lives still hung from the master's hand. But as Baptiste passed, Caleb shifted his stance and placed his left foot carefully on the ground, avoiding a patch of soft mud near the path. A child's lesson. A father's lesson. Remembered. Baptiste saw it and kept walking. That was all the farewell they were allowed. Not an embrace, not justice, not repair. Only proof that the master had failed to erase the first language between them. The bayou kept the rest. The roots, the black water, the hidden channels, the places where dogs lost scent and men with guns lost certainty. The swamp did not make them free. It gave them a chance to move. The people made the resistance. And the hidden road remained open. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more dark histories of survival, betrayal, and resistance that were never meant to be remembered. And comment where you're watching from. Your city, your state, your country. Was Caleb a traitor, a victim, or a man waiting for the first chance to resist? I want to hear your theory.